Welcome to the Working Genius podcast, where we discuss anything and everything related to the 6 types of working genius and how it impacts your work and your life. I'm Patrick Lencioni, and I'm your host today. I'm joined by the core team, Cody Thompson, Tracy Noble, and Matt Lencioni. How you guys doing?
Doing great, Matt.
Great.
Back by popular demand, Matt.
Sure. Somebody wrote a note, said, Matt, get on that mic. So we are here. We love doing these because this is just a conversation about the working genius model and the various elements of it that it's very deep.
Yep.
There's lots of things to talk about. And today's topic is what, Cody?
The 3 phases.
The 3 phases. Now doesn't sound super sexy and it's kind of vague, but at the core of this model, there are 3 phases of getting any kind of work done. And that's how this model came about, actually. And in addition to that, we're going to talk about something later called the elevation of the different working geniuses. And we're going to use the analogy of landing a plane. But first, let's talk about the 3 phases of work.
Yeah, and I think the reason that this is interesting is because I think maybe even before we discovered this tool, we thought of work in 2 phases. And I think that's the general answer out there is, hey, we think of work in 2 stages, which is, well, we're going to lay them all out right here, which is ideation.
The first stage of work is to ideate, to come up with a new idea.
Right. And the last stage of work, which we previously thought was the second stage of work, is implementation. So we
get it done.
Think of ideas and we execute on those ideas.
Right.
And what was so interesting, Pat, when you wrote these 6 circles up at the very beginning of the discovery of this model, and you outlined that there's a third missing middle step, in and of itself, I thought, man, if all you discovered, aside from the working genius model and the 6 types of working genius, if all we had discovered that day was the fact that there is a critical middle phase of work, it would have helped so many teams and companies to think about. And that middle phase is activation.
Right. And that's the part of work that is easy to miss. And I think a lot of companies do. And what's interesting is since we all have 2 working geniuses, sometimes one of our geniuses in one phase and one's in another. Yep. Sometimes we have 2 in the same phase.
And for those of you who haven't seen this on a written description or a graph or some sort, the first 2, and we'll just put it in the model.
Yeah, let's go through this.
So,
ideation is the first 2 working geniuses.
Right, which is wonder and invention. So ideation is people go, oh, hey, here's a question worth asking. And an inventor, the wonder asks the question, the inventor says, I have an idea.
And a lot of people think that ideation is just the invention, but it starts actually with the question. And that's what I like to say about people with a genius of wonder. They often don't even think about it as a genius at all. But wonder is not one of my working geniuses. And so I don't love to contemplate things and sit and think and ponder. Other people often do that. Usually at work, it's Amy, and at home, it's my wife, Laura. Mm-hmm. They are wanderers, and they can sit and ponder for hours. And that's usually where the need for an invention comes from.
Mm-hmm. And you're so quick to move on because you've got such a strong eye. You're moving on to the invention right away.
Yes.
So I think it's hard for you to sit in the question for too long.
It does. It really is. And that's why, but when Laura or Amy or anybody else comes to me and says, hey, I have a problem that I think is worth solving and I think is really important. Will you help me invent a solution? That's when I start to get excited.
Well, and I had a person email just this week. I thought this email was really interesting, even in the concept of this. This person is a WI, a wonder inventor.
That's my wife.
And what they said in the email was, I can't really even separate the 2. Are you sure? They were asking are you sure wonder is different from invention? And the answer is, it totally is, because if you've ever met a wonderer who doesn't have invention, that's really, they just go, I don't know what the solution is, but here's a really great question. And so this person was just, their natural 2 geniuses were WI. They connect that so intrinsically that you ask a question and you provide a solution. But these are very, very different things.
Well, and I think Elon Musk is an interesting example because I'm sure he's an inventor. I don't think he's a wonderer because he's trying to solve a lot of problems that don't need to be solved. Right. He just loves to come up with new ideas. And sometimes I think probably somebody is like, it'd be good to say, do you really think we need to do that?
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't know. I just can't help it. So I think that, and I'm one of those too. I'm an inventor, not a wonderer. So I really depend on other people thinking about the bigger picture.
Well, and Matt, you have invention as in your working frustration, right?
Yeah.
And I remember just yesterday, or no, not yesterday, last week, you came up with an idea, which is an inventor trait.
A rare good one.
And I was like, Matt, you must be exhausted. But you described your worst job would be sitting in a room and someone coming in and saying, hey, can you help? Can you be the person that solves this problem?
Yeah, an empty whiteboard is scary.
Yeah.
Right. Which is so funny because you're my son and I live for that.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, oh yeah, please don't make me do it. We can see when we come in and go, Matt, come up with a new idea. You're just like, no. Why are you asking me this?
Yeah.
And that's what's the beauty of this model. And that like ideation is not your thing.
Not at all.
And so it's easy to go, why doesn't that person come up with the new ideas? What's wrong with them? It's like, they don't have those gifts.
Yep.
So that's the first phase of work. The first phase is ideation. People love to talk about this thing. Of course, let's go and talk about implementation next.
Yep.
Because implementation is critical. And then we're going to tell a story about a guy at Nike and what his feedback was. But implementation is, these are the people that just love to get going and implement and get things done.
Execute.
Right. But it's not just the person who likes to get things done. There's also the E. So Tracy, one of your geniuses is in implementation, but it's not T.
That's right.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, I have the genius of enablement. And
Right.
this is, I respond more to the person. So someone comes along, let's say it's a G, comes along and says, we're moving forward on this. I will stand behind the person. It's less about the getting it done and it's more about, I'm going to support you.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But that's necessary.
The
That's
way I
right.
think about it, I can only carry something so far.
Yes.
When Liam asks me for something and I try to get it done for him,
That's
I can
right.
only carry it to a certain point until it becomes more in tenacity, which is one of my frustrations.
That's right. And I can carry it a little bit further because my tenacity is in my working competency.
Yeah.
So I feel like I get the implementation piece.
But without you and Matt, so many projects never get going because you have to come along and say, I will
That's
help
right.
get this going. But neither of you really love finishing it.
That's right. Yes.
And Pat, you often describe the difference between enablement and tenacity as enablement. The person with enablement cares a lot about the person,
Which is what Tracy was just saying. Yeah.
and that tenacity cares more about the execution of the project.
Right.
And so, some people can go like, "Hey, I'm implementing," or what do you mean that the enablers kind of get it off the ground? It's like they're responding to the galvanizer, what we'll talk about in a minute, and they want to help. And like you said, stand behind them and support. And then at some point, it has to go to, let's finish this thing. And it's not about the person anymore. It's about getting it done.
It's about checking the box.
Yeah.
And I'm not interested in checking the box.
Right. And but you'll do it as long as you know it's helping somebody. But if you think that person is no longer interested, it's like, well, why would I care about this then? Connor, Matt's identical twin brother, he has T, tenacity, but not E. Because see, some people will say, well, don't you have to have them both? Connor does not just love to help people. He loves to get things done.
Mm-hmm.
And so when somebody comes on and says, hey, will you help me with this? He's not going to go, yeah, sure. He's going to go, is it really going to get done? Can I help you finish it? Because if you're not going to finish it, I'm not going to help.
Yeah, totally.
So it's so interesting how identical twins, you love to help, but not necessarily to finish. He loves to finish, but not necessarily to help. And Cody and I, we don't like to help or finish. E and T, the implementation phase, is both of our working frustrations.
That's right. It's funny. I've said this to my wife multiple times. I didn't have the working genius tool before we got married. I just got lucky because she has, hers are DT, discernment and tenacity, but with some E in there. So it's I really hit the working genius marriage jackpot with her without ever knowing that was true.
Yeah.
Now, another thing we should say about this is, according to our data, and I'm sure we'll do a podcast about this later, but most people in the world live in the implementation phase. The most common combination is ET.
Right.
By far.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
It's not surprising, though.
When you think about the fact that something we're going to talk about in a bit, most of the time in the world is spent in ET.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about how much time is used in these things, ideation, you can ideate for 5 or 10% of the time, and then 90% comes in the next two phases, and the bulk in implementation.
Mm-hmm.
But they're all critically important. So let's talk about the middle phase.
Yeah, the middle phase.
And tell us about the story at Nike, Cody.
Well, yeah, to talk about the middle phase. So, you have WI, wonder and invention, and then you have enablement and tenacity in the last phase, implementation. And I think so much of work tends to happen that way, where an inventor responding to a wonder would invent something, and then people just go and carry it out. And we see this happen all the time. that there was this missing middle step that include the middle two geniuses, which are discernment and galvanizing. And so we probably within the first 2 weeks of coming up with this model, so we had no assessment, we had no questions, we just had the concept. We got some people on the phone from Nike in the innovation center, and I was like telling them about this model, drew all 6 circles up there. I think even at the time we were using different words. You know, we were using different words than enablement, and I threw it up there, and they said, "Oh my gosh!" So this whole team around innovation at Nike said, "Oh wow, this is a huge problem for us. We have been thinking of work in implementation, ideation, and then implementation. We would think of new ideas, new sneakers, new products, and we'd throw them over the wall, and some of them wouldn't work." And actually, one of the phrases we used early on is there's a lot of startups that have this concept called fail fast. You know,
right?
And that's just a bad way of avoiding the middle steps, which are discernment and galvanizing. And so when you think about this, like the inventor invents something, the very next thing cannot be enablement, which is, let me go help you with that.
But this happens so much.
It happens all the time.
They say, and even at our company, I would say, "Hey, I have an idea." And Tracy and Karen would go, "Okay, what do you want us to do?"
Right.
And we realize, nothing. We need to talk about it some more.
We have to discern this thing.
But like at Nike, they were taking this new sneaker concept or something and throwing it over the wall to the implementers and going, "Here you go, you guys." And they were like, "Okay, I guess they want us to do this." Half the ideas didn't work. And the implementers were frustrated at the ideators for giving them ideas that weren't fleshed out. The ideators were frustrated at the implementers because how come you can't make these brilliant ideas work? And what they realized, there was nothing going on around discernment and galvanizing.
And that's such a critical step. That's what I said, is like this middle phase of work is as much a discovery as the tool itself, because there's so many teams we've worked with now where they do have a wonder inventor as maybe like the founder. They thought of this idea. Oh, the world needs this business. And then they surrounded themselves with implementers. And then there was this ongoing frustration on these teams where, like you said, the people on the implementation side are all on the verge of burnout because they're executing on every idea. And the inventor's frustrated, like, why aren't we getting enough out of these? And it's because first what the inventor wants, Pat, and this is what you want, is I want you to help me know if this idea is good.
Right. Discernment, feedback, vetting. Now, Matt, you don't like to invent, but your number one genius is discernment.
Mm-hmm.
So you would prefer, how does that work for you? And think about me as an inventor.
Well, I love evaluating your ideas. And anytime I get to kind of think about the merit of an idea and give feedback, I love giving feedback.
Right. And remember those first few days of coming up with the model and the questions that went with it. Remember how we were downstairs in the cottage?
Oh yeah. That was such an incredible time because you were just throwing out ideas, and Matt and I and Cody, we just sat there and we discerned. And it was
some of the most fun work I've ever had in 25 years.
Oh, we had so much fun.
Because we realized you're the inventor, Pat. So come up with a question out of the blue, pull it out of your ear. And then I'd put it on the board, and Matt and Tracy would sit there. I think you guys were just having a baby at the time. And Matt and Tracy would go, "Oh, that's a great question. Oh, no, that one won't work. No, what about this? You can tweak it this way." And we were like, this is exactly the model.
Totally.
Inventors need discerners.
That's right. It's that loop that is so much fun.
Right.
When you have a team that's tapping into their geniuses the way we did in that basement with those questions, is like, here's what happens when you don't have this framework. Is somebody throws out an idea. I've seen this happen on teams, and we've done it ourselves before. We had this, this concept is you throw out an idea and somebody's like, "No, I don't think that's it. I don't think that's the right question." And then the inventor goes, "Well, you think of a question. No, do you have a better idea?"
Right.
And you're looking at Matt, who has no invention. He's like, "No, I don't have a better idea. I just know that that's not the right one." And so when we can tap into the other people's genius, like, you didn't care. You were throwing out ideas and we were discerning them. And then it was like, we were tapping into all of our strengths at that point.
When I think about Tracy as an editor, she's the discerner on my books.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and I have discernment too, but when you're inventing, it's hard to discern your own stuff sometimes. So Tracy, does the idea of writing a book from scratch appeal to you?
Oh gosh, that sounds awful.
Right. How about you, Matt?
Yeah, awful.
Right. And yet I love it.
That's right.
But when I write it, my audience is Tracy, my editor.
Mm-hmm.
It's the reader eventually and everybody else, but I really am writing to please Tracy because I know that if she reads it and likes it, I'm like, "Oh, that's so cool." But sometimes she'll go, "I just don't like this chapter. I don't like that character. I don't think this is working anymore." And that's a huge service to me. Think about how many authors, many are not successful, write something that they think is brilliant and then send it to a publisher and they publish it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work because there was no discernment. Think about how many movies get made because some writer or director comes up with I have this great idea for a movie, and then says to somebody, fund this movie and let's get started. And it's like, oh, no, you need some discernment,
Totally.
which is why so many crappy movies get made because nobody is pushing back and saying this isn't going to work.
Well, and it's iterative. I think a lot of people think of discernment as like a buy-sell decision, like a Shark Tank of, hey, that's a great idea versus, or that idea sucks or that idea is good versus, oh, you know what? Let's improve that.
Yes.
The discerner can help the inventor improve the idea going, oh, you haven't quite thought about this, or I don't think this is going to work. And so it's not hey, let's thumbs up ideas and thumbs down other ones. It's a real refining process.
Absolutely.
And then it has to go to the next genius, like the second critical piece of the activation stage.
Once the inventor discerner loop finishes and the discerner goes, this is great. I think this could be a great idea.
Then you need someone who galvanizes it. And what's sad is if you first, if you have an inventor and no discernment, you can galvanize a lot of the wrong things, right? So it has to be in this order. But if you have a inventor with discernment and you get the best ideas in the world and no one to galvanize it, it's not going to work no matter what.
Yeah, I will say, as I sit here today, that your galvanizing of the working genius model was so critical. Because when you came back in, or we shared this with you, you were like, this is bigger than anything we've ever done. We should build a whole company around it. We are going to pour into this. And we needed that because otherwise we might have launched a little thing and said, this is okay, and thrown it in as part of something else. And you said, no, this is huge. And you were the one who got people inside the company excited about it. You were the one that got people outside the company excited about it. And when I look back, galvanizing was a huge part of the success of this model. And in the past, we might have just whiffed on that.
On so many levels, because this is actually how the model came about as well.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because our company was lacking G.
And I was doing it all the time.
That's
I didn't
right.
like it. And it was frustrating me. And that's the question that prompted this whole model.
That's right.
Well, it's been interesting. I mean, not just because I'm a thank you but for that, by the way, but not just because I'm a galvanizer. I enjoy that. And honestly, because I'm a discerner galvanizer, it's like, oh, if that's the right idea, and I think it is, then I need to go tell everyone about it. Mine just happened to be connected in that activation stage, which I love.
Yeah, you're an activator, aren't
Right.
you? You're the guy that has two geniuses in the same phase.
But I've now worked with teams. In fact, just a week ago, a team that is great, has a great inventor. The collective discernment on the team is really high, and they had all frustrations in galvanizing. And it was like they were coming up with brilliant ideas, and they thought, this is legitimate mindset of people who don't recognize the value of galvanizing is if we come up with the best idea, people will like it.
Right.
And they'll get rallied around it.
The
It's
world
like,
is a meritocracy and everybody recognizes talent. No, it's not like that.
no. And so it really is a critical step that even if you're on a team and you have all the great you answer the right question, you have an inventor, you discern it and make it really good. If you don't have someone that's out there rallying the troops around it internally, and getting people focused around it. And I will say this, galvanizing is not a one-time event.
No.
This is constantly circling the wagon.
And it's not doing it yourself. It's getting other people, enlisting the aid of others and pushing them.
Yep.
And that's the thing. I've always felt like I was pushing all the time. And I don't want to be the chief pushing officer.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm writing the book right now, by the way. And we talk about, at one point, the CEO in the book says, I don't want to be the chief pushing officer. And they make another guy that job.
Really?
And that's what you are here, Cody. You're the chief pushing officer. And I am so happy that I don't have to be. Now I have to push you,
Right.
because that's my job.
Yep.
But you're not too hard to push.
And Cody's galvanizing has been super important. I mean, for me and Tracy as enablers, his galvanizing is what provides us with like the excitement and direction that we get to respond to. At least when we were coming up with this model and everything, we get to respond to his galvanizing.
Right. You need it.
Yeah.
You need it.
You need that. It's energy.
Right.
Everyone needs that energy. And Cody brings a level of energy unlike anyone here.
Right.
Well, and what's interesting too is as a galvanizer, I can tell you that the worst experience as a galvanizer is when you're trying to inspire people to move and there's no enablers in the room and they don't. The same way that the inventor likes the discerner and the loop that goes on in that, refining loop, galvanizers need enablers because it's like, I can go out there and give my best speech around what we need to do with this. And if everyone just stares back at me blankly, I'm like, oh no, what do I do here? And it's part, people always ask, like, describe a little bit more. It's part inspiration. I think it's like you can inspire people to act, and it's part pushing and disrupting and pushing people outside of their comfort zone and saying like, no, we need more.
And half of me, I like the inspiration part, but not the pushing because I feel guilty. Tracy hates this, right? Tracy, because
I hate both.
having to push people. Like, Tracy, how would you like to make somebody do something they don't want to do?
I will not do it.
Right. And this was what, like, oh my gosh, that's how this model came about, is that there were so many people like that in the organization. Now, Matt, you actually can galvanize if you're called on to do it.
Mm-hmm. It's one of my competencies, yeah.
Right. But it's not your favorite thing.
Not my favorite.
You would rather just judge it and have other people get on board and then help it get going.
So I think that the big piece here is like, okay, work has 3 phases.
Yep.
And not everybody's are connected. Not everybody's geniuses are like, oh, it conveniently you're
mine,
a DG.
I'm part ideator, part activator.
And ID, yeah.
Tracy and Matt are both part activator, part implementer.
Mm-hmm.
You just happen to be both in the activation.
Right. And some people can be a WT or an IE or an IT, so they can skip that whole phase. But I think when you look at this holistically and you say, we have to think of work in 3 phases, I think more often than not, if you think about companies in the world, some of them are really good idea companies.
Yep.
Some of them are really good execution companies.
Yep.
And the best companies in the world do all 3. They do ideation, activation, and implementation.
Yeah. Activation is the one that's more of the art that people don't see.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this brings us to our next thing, which is, and we alluded to this, right, Tracy?
Yes, you did.
That we spend different amounts of time. And Matt, you said there's more people in the implementation phase than any.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because that is closer to the actual work, as we say. Now, it's all elements of work, but like getting it done. So we thought about it. There's actually an elevation of the 6 types of working genius, starting at the very highest elevation, which is, call it 50,000 feet. Imagine you're in an airplane and the W says, hey, maybe we should land the plane eventually here.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we should land it. They're asking the question. That's at 50,000 feet. A little lower is the inventor that goes, okay, I think we should land it in that airport down there.
Yep.
So they come up with the solution. Okay, so people go, okay, now we're getting a little lower. And then the D says, wait a second, is that really the right place to land? Is our fuel good for that? Do they have enough things around there? If we land there, we're going to have something to eat and get what we need.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about this a little bit more. And then they go back to the inventor. It's like, is there another airport around there that we can land in? They're like, oh, okay, yeah, you're right. Let's land it in this other nearby airport. Now they go, okay, we're good on that. So we better get ready to land. Now we're down to 20,000 feet. And the galvanizer says, okay, if that's really where you want to land, yep, it is. I'm going to get everybody ready. Okay, we need to call the airport. We need to get our gear down. We need to make sure everybody's ready.
Tray tables up.
Exactly, all that. And now we're down to 5,000 feet.
Mm-hmm.
And the enabler goes, okay, we're landing. Okay, I'm going to help get everything ready. And I'm whatever you need from me. And then at the very end, we're at 100 feet. And the T is like, I'm going to land this friggin' plane.
Yep.
So it's like this process, and more of it is spent landing the plane, preparing for landing, getting people excited and ready. And so that's kind of how this works. So if you're a W and a T, you're operating at 50,000 feet and 100 feet.
Mm-hmm.
That could be pretty jarring for them.
Yep.
Right? And so it's really interesting to think about this, because when you have your head in the clouds and your feet on the ground, both of them, that's a stretch.
Yeah.
Whereas I kind of live with my head mostly in the clouds and my feet poking out of the clouds, bringing it down. But then when it comes to actually landing the plane, that's not my thing.
Well, and I think it is interesting that when we got 80,000 data points back, and we see that there's a good majority of people, not majority, but the biggest combination is ET. I'm like, thank the Lord, because
I know
the whole world of work. Like if we had everybody in the top altitudes here, the world would be an entirely different place.
I always
roads would be half finished, and we couldn't get anywhere, and there'd be nothing in stores.
If I think if I grew up when they were settling the West, I would have been like that guy. That guy's worthless.
Yeah.
He keeps us entertained sometimes, but he can't do anything.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
They're like, build a fence, Pat. And
Yeah,
you're like,
no, let's talk. I got a good joke about a fence. Do we really need a fence? Let's think of another idea.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting thing. We need a lot of ENT. Some organizations don't need as much as others. Some are primarily ENT.
And I think that point is worth saying is there every job, every team, every industry needs a little bit of all these.
Yep.
Even if you're at a factory and you're a line worker on a factory, that is mostly an ET job, right? Like you help and you finish it and do it the way that you're asked. But if no one is in the 50,000 foot, if no one's in the ideation phase, if there's not a single person's job who it is at that factory to say, could we do this better? Or is there a more efficient way for us to do this? Or are we even making the right thing anymore? You know, like, could we have a better, if you don't have that, then you're going to get swallowed by your competitors, because anybody who spends the time, who thinks, you know what, we're a factory company, we don't need invention here. Any team, any industry can benefit from you tapping into all of these stages of work.
You know, I'm always fascinated by like products that haven't been changed. Like, we're a paperclip company. You know what I mean? Like, we make paper clips. It's like, there is not a heck of a lot of wondering and invention going on. But there is about like, can we do this better? Do we have the right approach to this? But so that's going to be very little W and I.
Yep.
Probably not a heck of a lot of D and G too. But then another company is manufacturing, like Veridesk is one of our companies, it's called. Well, they're inventing new things all the time. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of W and a lot of I involved in that, lots of D and lots of G. Now, at some point, they got to go manufacture their desks and tables and everything, chairs and everything else they do. But so just because it's a factory doesn't mean, it kind of depends on what you're doing and what's changing and what's not. At the same time, if you're a think tank, there's not a lot of ENT going on.
Yeah. But I do think it's important for us to think, I mean, the reason we called it the 6 types of working genius for a good reason. And that is that all of these represent a stage of work.
Yep.
And I think the tendency is to go like, oh, implementation, that's the real work. And the truth is that might be the most visible and the most time intensive and the most laborious type of work. But all of these are required in getting anything done.
You know, I want to use another example, planning a family vacation. I mean, it was always a grind in our family. There were 6 of us. We always went with another family, and there was 11 people to organize. But somebody has to say, you know, maybe we should do a vacation with just our family. Or maybe we should do something where we spend a little bit more time. That's the W part. Mm-hmm. The inventor goes, oh, I know the perfect place. And they go online and they find, oh, yes, we could find a house there. And then the D needs to go, whoa, wait a second. We are going to be...
There's 12 of us. We can't all fly on that plane, you know.
And we're going to have to drive 6 hours to get there. That's going to be miserable. Oh, okay. How about this place? Yeah, that'll be better. That's the ID thing. And then the G needs to go, let's get the families together, get them excited about this. Mm-hmm. Now, then somebody goes, I'll help us pack. I'll book the flights or whatever else. I'll rent the car. And the T is like, I'm going to make sure that the list gets done so that when the vacation comes up, we haven't forgotten anything. Mm-hmm. It all is critical. And there's some families that just do the E and the T, and they're like, why are we here again? It's like, well, shut up. I got us here. And the others that do the WI, this sounds great, but nobody vetted it, and we're 600 miles away from anything. And so you need all of this, or it collapses.
Totally.
And I just think it's so good to understand that in all facets of life.
That we need each other. That was one of the major takeaways after we discovered this is no one of us has all 6 geniuses. Life is a team sport. Find out where you slide into this and what ideation, activation, implementation, how you can contribute. I think that's going to make a world of difference for people in their job and their lives.
All right. I hope this has been interesting. I want to thank you guys for being here, and we will talk to you next week on the Working Genius podcast. God bless.